All of our BC legends have their own story to tell, as is the case of John Montalbano. An East Side kid with no real mentors or role models to inspire him, John graduated from UBC without any strong idea of what he wanted to do with his life. But as it turns out, his intelligence, integrity, and resilience took him to the top of the world of finance. When he retired, he was the CEO of the Royal Bank's Global Asset Management Division, handling $370 billion in assets. And that's billion with a capital B. I don't know how you'd sleep at night with that kind of responsibility. But business success is not what drives John Montalbano. It's his desire to give back and make a difference in our community. So many of our cultural and social service organizations have been the beneficiaries of his support. Financial, yes, but more significantly, the gift of his time and experience. Now, as an angel investor, he has become a mentor to over 30 of BC's young startups. John Montalbano. John, you grew up on the East Side and you're a good Catholic lad. When you think back to your dreams as a young boy growing up, did you ever imagine that you would one day be handling $370 billion of people's money for the largest bank in Canada? I mean, how do you go from there to there?
I have to say back then, if I had $370, I thought I hit it pretty big. We didn't dream very big back then. You know, my father was a janitor. My mother was a short order cook. She worked at a coffee mug at the Bay, for those who still remember that cafeteria in the basement. And so the dream was just getting an education and seeing where it took you from there. And for a lot of Italian families in particular, the dream was being a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, a priest. And frankly, none of them really appealed to me. So I was actually going through life wondering where I was going to land. And it was a complete mystery to me until I got to the university. And there I thought, for example, I'd become a physiotherapist and sort of hang around with all the sports teams. And then I thought, well, maybe law. And then I stumbled into accounting, and then I thought accounting's not for me either, and stumbled into finance. But when I think about where I was at that time in East Vancouver, a lot of us didn't have mentors. We didn't actually have anyone successful to emulate. So you can dream big, that life will be better one day, but you didn't really know what that meant because you actually had no real life examples other than what you saw on television.
Well, you did end up in finance. So what did you love about finance?
First of all, it wasn't accounting. That's what I loved about it. I remember I was in a classroom and thinking that my life was going to be accounting. And all due respect to accountants, they serve the community as well. But it wasn't for me, but I thought it was going to be my destiny. And Professor Wood, we were in this big class at UBC, that's a couple hundred kids, and he just mentions that the university is launching a program called the Portfolio Management Foundation, and it'll take 6 kids, and they're going to manage some real money, and it's going to be about investing and your skills that you've learned so far in accounting and finance and statistics will be applied to this course. You're going to have mentors, and as soon as I heard the word mentors, I thought, you know what, I'm going to apply to this thing. Between then and the interview, I did as much reading as I could on investing, and unbelievably somehow got accepted into the program. And from there, what I discovered that I loved about finance was pretty much everything that spoke to me personally. Number one, it was creative. Number two, it was strategic. It required risk-taking. And there's a history with me with respect to risk. And also, it was interactive. It was very people-oriented. So stepping into this program, I actually found my place. Bigger than that, though, was the fact that mentors that were provided to us included Milton Wong.
You referred to something about risk-taking?
Yeah, coming back to East Vancouver, life wasn't, we had a good life. My parents were remarkable people. And my sister and I we grew up in a home where we felt loved and we felt supported. But my dad was, he was hard. Like he was a hard driving man. He worked really, really, really hard and was really proud of, if he couldn't be proud of his job, he was proud of how hard he worked. But he was also at the same time, never happy. And I can pinpoint the time when that happened, as a young man without an education coming to Canada, then landing in Vancouver and seeing other Italian families, whether it's the Bozas or the Aquilinis or whomever else doing well in real estate. He felt, well, you know what, I should do that too, but he could never take the risk of losing it all for that attainment. And so that always stayed with me. And I always thought that, you know what, if there's one thing I'm going to do in my life, the one thing I'm going to do is take risk if it's intelligent risk. And if I think it's a good trade-off between the downside and the upside, then it's worth doing. And so the ability to find an industry where you can take risk was exciting for me, and provided me an avenue that I would not otherwise found, perhaps, if I went down some other profession.
So that's what you loved about the world of finance and asset management. What did you hate about it?
Oh, that one's easy. A good partner of mine at PHN used to say, your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, and the industry's greatest strength is its people. The industry's greatest weakness is its people. There's a lot of narcissists in the business, and we spend a lot of time being the good people in the industry, always making sure that you put the clients first, that you're ethical above all else, and you have an environment where you're collegial and having fun. But every once in a while, you'll see narcissistic tendencies or egos that they all of a sudden would like to make it about themselves, or it's about how big of the pie they can get. And even the best environments, those individuals still kind of pop up. So I would have to say it's an unbelievable industry, challenging you all the time. It would be perfect, but for the narcissists and the social paths. So I think every industry has them, but certainly we weren't immune to that. But that's the thing I wouldn't like about it. So you spend a lot of time trying to not to hire those kind of people, move away from them if you see them, and not do business with them. There's a few cases where there was opportunities to strike large deals with potential clients, and you realize this is not a person or a group that we want to do business with. And regardless of what the headline would be or how profitable it could be to our bottom line, you just have to walk away from it, because not all business is good business. And so those tendencies can be on either side of the table, or anywhere, frankly, in your travels in this industry. So that would be the thing I would say hate. I don't use that word very often. That'll be the first time I've used it this year. And I've maybe used that word 6 times in a year. That would be one of the things I hate, is the narcissistic tendencies that you can see in finance. The stakes are so high, that's why.
And you were at the top. I mean, you were running global wealth management for RBC. You retired early, I would say, as a young man. Why did you decide it was time to move on?
Yeah, there was a few reasons. About 20 some odd years ago, a friend and I co-founded with a couple of other people Take a Hike Youth at Risk Foundation. And Take a Hike takes kids from everywhere in the Lower Mainland. But these kids are normally out of the school system for 1 or 2 years, drug and alcohol addiction, sex practices, gangs, affiliations, other forms of petty crime, emotional, sexual, physical abuse. These are the kids that have nowhere else to go if not for Take a Hike. This was actually held at my old high school, John Oliver, and so when we co-founded Take a Hike, it was with this young social worker who studied at Princeton and brought this program to Vancouver. And it's a program where you combine essentially outward bound activities with self-learning. So a lot of these kids might have attention deficit disorder, other learning disabilities. So you have to put them on a self-learning path, but they have no self-esteem. And so these outward adventures, snow caving, going on kayaks through rivers and doing all sorts of things that would test them and give them some adrenaline and get them to feel good about themselves that they did something they thought they never could do. What happens is that you can teach them how to feel good about themselves, number one, and then they're more open to learning, number two. But we also have a counselor, a therapist in class, full time. So if these kids have had a bad day, they can go for a walk with the therapist and get free therapy. And so I asked the therapist, tell me why there's so many kids from the West Side in this program. I don't get it. And I asked, so what do I need to know? And they said, well, look, between 0 and 12, a child just needs one functional parent. So if you're traveling around the world doing what you do, as long as your spouse is home and anchored, your children will be fine. And thankfully, I had that with my wife. Dana was remarkably committed to the children. And then in their teens, he said, if possible, your boys will need role models that are aligned with their interests and their needs as boys. And young girls, same thing. He goes, the unfortunate part is you're going to be arguing the whole time with these kids while you're home, but they need you there. That's part of the process. So I thought to myself, there'll be a point in time where when the boys get in their teens, I actually want to be home because I've been traveling. I just got my 3 million mile gift from Air Canada last week. And I've got $1 million on top of that with all these other airlines. I thought, there's a point in time where it will be more valuable to say I was a success at home than I was a success in business. So when both boys became teenagers, I decided, which in 2015 that happened, I decided it was time to retire. But as I said, I retired from the bank. I didn't retire from business or from life. So I'm very active right now in the startup communities, in biotech and fintech and all sorts of other businesses in Vancouver, mentoring a lot of young entrepreneurs. And so for me, it was a nice time to leave. I felt that I accomplished all that I could accomplish at the bank. I had a successor who was ready, and I was ready to step out. So it was really good timing for me.
When you mentioned the nonprofit that you've been supporting, I started to count all of the nonprofit cultural and social services organizations in town that you are part of, and I lost count. Yeah. I mean, you are just everywhere. You, of course, were the chair of the Vancouver Public Library Capital Campaign, chair of the St. Paul's Hospital Foundation, chair UBC Governors, director Asia Pacific, director of the Canada Pension Plan, and on and on and on. Why do you do that?
Milt Wong had a profound impact on me. He was obsessed with the community. He was absolutely obsessed with what contributions are you giving back to the community. As a young, impressionable person, I just sat back and thought, having been raised in a religious background, where you're thinking about community, it's already sort of embedded in you, but you don't really know how. Again, when you grow up in a middle class or lower family, you're thinking about hoarding. You're not thinking about giving away because you don't have a lot, and what you have, you don't want to lose. Hearing Milt talk about giving rather than hoarding, it was a real eye-opening experience for me. And so I spent a lot of time with Milt trying to understand, why are you so taken aback by philanthropy? And he walked through, John, how fortunate we are to come from where we are to see actually the problems firsthand. Here in retirement, if I have the capacity to help, and I think it's aligned with my interests and my values, I'm more than happy to volunteer my time and support these initiatives. The library was one of the funnest things I had ever done. And
all of the BC legends that we talked to, somewhere along the way there's a bump or a problem. It's never a straight line. And for you, a big bump was at UBC.
Yeah.
Tell me the story.
The Board of Governors is an interesting fiduciary body. It has nothing to do with the academic mission of the school per se. It's really about the business of the university. And so we have a duty to ensure that the leadership of the university is mindful of all stakeholders of the university. And as chair, you have to ensure that whoever is leading the institution is acting in the best interest of the full institution. And that's our duty as a board. And we were met with some challenges where we had to accept the resignation of the president. And my existential crisis happened right after that. And because what we found was, and what we knew in advance was, in accepting that resignation, which was absolutely in the best interest of the university, it was going to get ugly. Probably the biggest lesson for me as a leader, and the advice I give to all leaders who come calling as a result of that experience, and say, what is the one thing you learned through that? First thing I say is, number one, never for a moment did I regret the actual outcome. I'll go to my grave knowing that was the best decision for the students, the best decision for the academics, the best decision for our community that rely on our communities that rely on the university. The thing that could have been done differently is don't give away the narrative. And so if you sign a non-disclosure, you've lost the narrative. And today in social media, people will quickly fill in that narrative for you. And you can't refute it, because you can't actually speak to the myth truths, the drama that people are creating for self-interest reasons. And there's nothing you can ultimately say. And so I would say that if you're finding yourself at a crossroads where the decision you're about to make is going to be very public, somewhat controversial, but definitely emotional, you can't sign away the narrative. You absolutely have to own the narrative. And that was the mistake. So you sat there in silence, thinking that someone somewhere will stand up and support you. Why? Because you're getting thousands of emails of people saying, I support you. However, I'm too afraid to speak. Remember, 2015 was kind of the start of the cancel culture, and where people were starting to weaponize social media and also weaponize academic freedom. And so you have really no defense against that if you don't have the narrative. And so people who would like to defend you will see how gruesome it can be online, and how weaponized people can use academic freedom and hide behind it, rather than use it for the public good that it was intended. And they're going to say, you know what, I can't win that fight. So I'm here, I'm quietly supporting you. I literally, Carol, had thousands of emails from people in faculty, people from all sorts of other universities. University presidents have all reached out, and they've all said, man, that was one fight you weren't going to win because you signed the non-disclosure, which you kind of had to at the time. So that's the biggest lesson I would have learned out of that.
And it was brutal because people may have quietly sent you emails, but you were standing alone in public getting pummeled.
And my family as well, right? And so it was interesting. So it was sort of a small, comfort that someone would send you an email saying, so keep standing, you're okay, you did the right thing. Meanwhile, you'll watch these individuals who, frankly, are not nice people. They're not moral people. They're opportunists. And you sit back and say, like, what motivates someone to do that? Like, why would someone even wake up one day and think that's even remotely okay? Yeah, it was brutal. For sure it was. It took me about 2 or 3 years to recover. I wanted to step into public service at that time. I thought part of retiring in 2015 was to commit myself to the community in a professional manner. And so that was put to the side. But, it is what it is. So you just got to say, okay, well, that's a moment in time. You did the right thing, but there came a cost, and you just got to move on.
Your interest in public policy has always been there as long as I've known you, and we have debates about some of the big issues. What about now? Would you think about putting yourself forward now for politics?
I'm not sure I want to now. I'm mentoring a lot of young people who are the emerging leaders in our community, and trying to channel my inner Milt Wong and my inner Art Phillips and others that have been had a profound impact on me when it came to the community and public policy. But it's interesting. I think it was a moment in time that I thought was right for me, where I'd have the energy, the drive, the youth, and I'm still at a crossroads in terms of, what's my last gig, and I figure I've got 10 years ahead of me still that could be very, very productive. I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now. So between the balance of community work, professional boards, where the boards that I'm on and serving are very engaged. So they're not just sort of these perfunctory check the box experiences. They're roll up your sleeves and let's help the founders succeed. And the entrepreneurial bucket has been really fun as well. So I'm torn because on the one hand, I really love what I do. On the other hand, like many, I'm dismayed by what I'm seeing on all sides of the spectrum.
It's interesting, you're an angel investor. Yeah. When you see a startup, I'm sure everybody comes and pitches to you. What captures your attention, and then is it just financial, or how do you deal with it?
It's fun to draw on my experience and to share it with young entrepreneurs. So your question is, what do I see? So it's always the people first. As the person you're about to work with and mentor, are they there because they just want to tick the box and say, I've got this person involved, and you're part of the sales story? Or are they there because they actually want to learn, what made you successful in your past life that I can take with me on my journey? And if they're willing to do that, then I'm excited to have another conversation. And the next conversation is, okay, tell me about your business and why this is different. Because one of the challenges with startups is, unlike finance, they suck up a lot of cash. And part of the challenge with the biotech and startup system is these kids had free money for almost 10 years. So if they failed, they got more money. They failed, they got more money. So of these young entrepreneurs who understood that there's scarcity of money, and that when people are investing in your company, that's a privilege. So it's the people, it's the idea, and then ultimately it's the possibility. Legacy for me is not so much what I achieved in business, because I didn't achieve anything in business. It's what we achieved in business. So it would be more about, when I'm being paraded in a box out the door, well, people say, boy, we've lost a good one, and I remember crying when Bob Lee passed away, and when Milt passed away, two immigrants to the city that, think about where they started from and what they left behind was this remarkable legacy of community. I'm not sure I'll achieve what they achieved for the city, but I want to make sure that when I'm gone, people are going to say, what, he sort of hit the pinnacle of his industry, and what a remarkable contributor to our community.
Thank you, John, for everything you've done.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
John Montalbano, a BC legend.